It's one thing to train young leaders how to lead. It's another thing to train adults how to train young leaders how to lead. In this session, I interview Nicki Straza, who has literally trained dozens and dozens of people how to develop their child's leadership potential. You're going to learn some of the best ideas, best practices, and from her years of wisdom. You're going to love this session.
Welcome to another edition of Kid Lead Academy Training Series with Dr. Alan E. Nelson, designed to help parents develop their children to lead so they can succeed. And now, here's Alan.
Hey, I'm excited to have on this edition of Kid Lead a friend we've been working together for many, many years. I'm going to read her bio because it's pretty impressive, and I want to make sure that I don't stumble over the words, okay? So Nicki Straza has over 25 years of leadership and organizational experience. She believes that flourishing leaders build flourishing cultures. So Nicki is actually a flourishing coach, a certified flourishing coach, sorry about that, specializing in workplace culture and supporting leaders and educators in their growth journey. And as the owner of Nicki Straza Coaching and Consulting, she also works with Woodview Mental Health and Autism Services. She's a speaker, an author, a curator of developmental experiences and workshops. And above all of that, she has 2 adult children and lives with her husband in Brantford, Ontario. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
So, Nicki, tell me about how you ever kind of got into the world of recognizing that leaders shouldn't just be adults. We should think of really, really young leaders. So what started that journey many years ago?
Well, it's interesting because I was the product of someone who saw leadership potential in me. And I know what that has done for me in my own life, in my own journey. And that was profoundly pivotal. When I was 14, my youth pastor, saw potential in me, started mentoring me, gave me opportunities, let me try my hand at things, debriefed with me. And I learned and practiced leadership as I was going through my teenage years. And to the point where, as a young adult, I was able to step into roles way ahead of my peers and take on responsibilities that my peers weren't quite ready for. And so right from the get-go, I was like sold on the idea of teaching leadership to, when you're young, because I'm living proof that it's an important thing.
I think it's interesting when we look at influencers in our lives. I mean, that's what Kid Lead Academy really is designed to do, to help parents and other adults to invest in young leaders and the mark they make. It's funny because that was your story. My story of getting into young leader development was kind of the inverse. I was a young leader who kind of got into trouble and no one ever developed me. I had to learn it on my own. So I look back and I think, man, wouldn't it have been so wonderful to have someone like you had in your life and develop that early? So I think that's so cool to hear that story. What did you do initially? I know you discovered Kid Lead several years ago as we were just getting going, but what did you do in the meantime to kind of identify or develop those young leaders on your own?
Well, it was interesting because I shared the philosophical principles of experiential learning. I didn't know all the fancy, leadership jargon. I'm not university trained. I didn't know fancy buzzwords. I wasn't a manager in a big corporation, but I did know how to run projects, how to lead teams. And I knew that the best way to give and teach leadership was to practice leading and then to have discussions around ethics and compassion and reliability and trustworthiness and some of those, 16 qualities of leadership and, just some of the character and competency elements that I didn't know, I didn't have language for, but I knew the character pieces were really important: trustworthiness, reliability, communication, and then of course, you have just those course organization organizational skills and stuff like that. And so I would take the work I was doing. I did a lot of work in children's ministry, and I would bring our youth along, and I would teach them how to teach the kids and give them opportunities to learn and grow and lead. And as they matured, we started having deeper and more intentional conversations. So when I got introduced, all I saw was one line that said kid lead training coming to Kitchener, Ontario. And I said, wait, kid and lead in the same sentence? Sold. Like, where do I buy my ticket? Because I'm like, I so believe in this. And it was literally a one-line thing in a corner, an offside of a newsletter that drew my attention. I think it's the only thing I saw in the whole newsletter that day.
That's funny. That's funny. So you've been working with kids and young leaders for years now. If someone, like a parent, if they're kind of wondering, how's my kid wired? I don't know if they're wired this way. What are some indicators you've seen in the kids who just seem to have a natural talent or aptitude to learn leadership fast? What are some of these that when you look at a group, you say, oh my goodness, that kid's got it?
Well, there are a bunch. And usually if some of the other adults are going, hey, that kid got it, that has it, that's a good clue. But there are those other hidden ones too, right? And, even pulling on stories like your own, where is the influence? Like, if you can look and you see that kid that can draw the attention away from the adults in the room, through a joke or through, hamming it up or whatever, that when that kid speaks, other kids listen, that's leadership aptitude. You'll meet that child that loves to organize all the things, make a plan, get strategy together. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that. That kid has leadership aptitude, and you're going to find those kids too, who play and pretend to be the teacher or the leader of something or other. That is leadership aptitude. And it comes in a lot of different ways. And but ultimately, leadership is about influence and the ability to garner an ear. So even that kid who has to negotiate a bedtime, 17 times a week, or whatever it is, they are finding their ways to negotiate and assert themselves. And those are moldable and shapeable skills.
And I love that, because I see those same things. I agree with you 100%. Why do you think, it took me, for over 40 years to get to the point of realizing that we needed to be focusing on future leaders, but why do you think young leaders and kids who have this sort of natural aptitude, where do you think they get misunderstood, or why is it that adults just don't see that in them?
Oh, that's a great question. And sadly, I think a lot of leaders get missed. The leaders that get caught and the ones that get really embraced are probably the ones that are strong academically. But that isn't actually the majority of kids with leadership aptitude. And I think it's because they are autonomous. They have a bit of a personality. They want to do things their way. And so depending on the adults that are working with them, that can be perceived as non-compliant or frustrating, or you're just being difficult, or, and if you are functioning in those types of behaviors and garner a label as troublemaker, that immediately demotes you from leadership qualifications in the current culture of the world. And unfortunately, those kids have leadership aptitude. They will lead. And if we don't actually invest in them and help them lead in ethical and compassionate ways, they're going to lead poorly, and they're going to lead many in that direction. True. But it's, I think as adults, we want that compliant, cheerleader who's going to do what we do and do what we want. But that's actually not the heart of leadership. And so we have to have some grit as adults when we're working with kids.
That's great advice. That's true. Isn't it so true? Because we as parents or educators or children's pastors. We love the compliant kids who listen to us talk and do our program, but they don't require much maintenance. So
Yeah.
that's tough. What have you learned over the years in terms of the benefits? You know, those kids that when you gave them a chance to lead or gave them some training, they blossomed. What were some of those benefits that
Mm.
you've seen?
Well, honestly, when you find that young man or that young woman who is struggling to figure out their space and you start calling out the leadership in them, and you watch them go from being a troublemaker to understanding and seeing value in their leadership capacity, they start to turn a corner on the ethical and the moral way that they lead. They start to take it a little bit more seriously. And to watch that transformation in a young person is truly remarkable. And I think it's really, really important because I think, you know, a lot of us have leadership capacity to some degree. Now, some are exceptional, high capacity leaders, and others may just be leading themselves, you know, in this journey. But if we can give those kids and take them, lift the ceiling however far they're willing to go, and really identify those kids with high capacity, we're doing them a favor. And what ends up happening is their confidence grows. They end up taking on more opportunities at a younger age. They are going to innovate and surprise you. I mean, some of the best young leaders that I've worked with have their own businesses as teenagers,
Huh.
are innovating and coming up with brilliant ideas. They're incredible volunteers. If you work in a nonprofit or church organization, like what a great opportunity for these kids to practice leading and serving. And there's so many benefits. And then when you bring that into 5 and 10 and 15 years of leadership, now you're looking at an entire generation who understand nuances of leadership in ways that that many who don't get that support just don't have, and they don't have as much unlearning to do. I think that
Hmm.
is,
Yeah.
I think one of the insights that I've really become aware, when you come at leadership from as an adult, it becomes a skill you practice when the context suits you. But when you learn it as a young person, it becomes who you are. And that authenticity, especially in 2023, where, you know, we're kind of over duplicit, inauthentic, control freak leaders, that inauthenticity, that ability to truly build rapport with people becomes so critical.
I loved one thing you said, which I say the same thing, is that if you catch them early, it's not tabula rasa. I mean, they already have some things they've learned, but we're all about pedagogy, we're all about learning, but we don't teach unlearning. And we as adults, by the time you get adulthood, you have some bad habits, you have some perception biases, some things that you don't understand. And how do you unlearn those? So I thought that was very insightful, probably because I agree with you, but it's very insightful about the unlearning process that we as adults we have to do. And that's tough. That's a tough thing to do. So I love that idea. If you were a parent, if you're a parent or an educator, or maybe you work in a church, listening to this either podcast or vodcast, what advice would you give people who are saying, I don't know if I can do that? You know, it's give us some best practice or some parting wisdom.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, my first question is, what is the cost if you don't? Right? Because, yeah, it's work. Yeah, there's an investment to be made. Yes, it's time. And there's probably some things that you're going to have to learn in order to do that. But what is the cost if you don't? What is the cost to that young person who flounders because they don't have a sense of purpose and their sense of identity and what they're naturally gifted at is laid to waste instead of nurtured? You know, it becomes really, really clear why we should. And so then, and I'm biased because I think Kid Lead is the best leadership material on the planet. And I use it in my adults. With my adults, I use it with my young adults and my kids. The principles hold up so profoundly. And most adults love to play, by the way. Newspaper dogs are the best. But here's the thing, like, Alan, you've put together so much work on creating these modules and creating these resources. So yeah, there's your best practice. Get something that's been tested, get something that's been working and use it. But, if you don't have those resources, find experiences and opportunities to invite your young people to do things alongside you. Move from doing things for your young people and help them do things with you, and maybe to even do things for you. And the more opportunity that you create to give them a bit of adversity without abandonment, give them some challenges and some problems to solve, involve them in the decision-making processes that you're doing in your ministry or your home. Those things nurture the critical thinking that is needed and gives them experience and a safe place to land when they screw it up, and they will.
I love that phrase you used. That alliteration there is without what is it? What was the phrase you used? I love that.
Adversity without
abandonment. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. That's like, because we like to, out of the love of our heart, we try to make it so easy for our kids. And, I've taught at University of USC, Southern California, in the business school. I kid you not. I had a student who I gave a grade to that they didn't like the grade. And so I'm on a video call talking to them, and mom and dad pop on the screen. And I said, you got it, in my head, you got to be kidding me. You're in college and mom and dad are flying in to try to save their baby in this paper. I was just aghast that happens. But I know it's well intended, right? I know that parents mean well, but we sometimes make it too easy. Yeah. So I love that phrase. That's a great phrase. Hey, in a couple minutes we have left, tell us a little bit about some of the projects you've done, because I love your Hero and Me and other things that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, so I actually have a program called Superhero and Me, which really addresses classroom culture and dynamic. It uses kindness to empower kids to make a difference in their world. Subsequent to that, I wrote a program called Leading Kindness, which I decided or wanted to be a subsequent to Superhero and Me and a precursor to Kid Lead, because I really love just having those feeder programs that I can look for those young leaders to bring into Kid Lead. And so Leading Kindness focuses on 8 leadership characteristics and how I can lead myself personally. So it's personal leadership rather than organizational leadership, which Kid Lead focuses on. But it's a really great way to kind of explore how to do that. And again, that's done in a club or classroom setting. And then I'm working on launching my coaching and consulting business, really supporting leaders in workplace culture. So whether that's in schools or churches or businesses, we know that leadership matters, and there is continued gaps in leadership. And how do we support leaders and build cultures that people can flourish in? And I think that comes from taking care of ourselves as leaders. So when we flourish as leaders, all of the things we touch, the environments and the people around us, they begin to flourish as well. And that's true for our kids. And that's true for all of those things. So yeah, those are a little bit of the things that I'm working on these days.
Nicki, if people hear this, see this, they want to get in touch with you, what's a good way to get in touch with you?
So my website is nickistraza.com, and all of my socials are Nicki Straza. So at Nicki Straza on Insta, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. and would love to connect with you through my website or otherwise. So thank you so much. It's been a really honor to be here and see your face again. It's great.
Nicki, you're awesome. Thank you for believing in young leaders. Thank you for believing in Kid Lead. And I hope that we connect very soon. Thanks so much for being our guest.
My pleasure.